Hello and welcome to an intimate afternoon conversation with NTAC for our School-Based Services Policy Learning Forum, a peer learning space where we're inviting school mental health leaders from across the country to share their experience. This is part 2 of our learning series. On Tuesday, we talked about the what and the why. Why is policy important? And today, we are getting into the nitty-gritty, and the part that sometimes makes us emotional is the who and the how. How are we translating the work from the paper to the field? And my name is Yasmina, and I will be your moderator for today. As always, the views and opinions expressed today are the panelists alone and do not reflect that of the U.S. government. If you are new to Zoom or need a refresher, these are the functions that you have available at your disposal today. If you like or agree, you can use a reaction. We encourage you to use the chat, ask questions, unmute yourself, and if you're listening at home, you can do all the reactions for yourself. Next. So we are the National Training and Technical Assistance Center for Child, Youth, and Family Mental Health. We are a diverse group of professionals, from pediatricians to youth advocates to family advocates to clinical practitioners to equity consultants to early childhood specialists, all here to service the wellness of our young people and school communities. So welcome. Today we're here to talk about how to implement policy, and I'm really excited to get to this conversation. And oftentimes we find ourselves rushing from event to event, so I want us all to take a moment and just settle in. Orient yourself to this place, to this setting, to this conversation in our pretend living room with some of our experts that we lean on in times of need, and who we would call if we had a problem to tackle. Next. Next. Hi, Angie. We're glad you're here. So today, go ahead. I'm really excited to get this conversation. And since we have an intimate audience this afternoon, it's going to be interactive. So we're going to orient those of you who are listening at home to what we talked about on Tuesday, ground ourselves into the purpose of why we're here and why we split this into 2 sessions, lay the foundation for who we have in the room and what kind of expertise, stories, challenges, and fun and failure and success that we bring to this conversation. And most of all, and most excitingly, we're going to get to the jammy jam of discussion on how to do this in the field. We have everyone from state to county leadership to Claudia is a newcomer coach inside a school district. So we have all levels of policy makers, changers, and implementers in the room. And we hope that you all leave today with a sense of capability and a sense of knowing that no matter your sphere of influence, you can impact change. And to help you with those learnings, we have created a guide to accompany the conversations today and on Tuesday. Carrie's going to drop the link in the chat for those of you who are joining us live. If you're at home, it is included on the registration page. So today, our policy leaders and change makers are going to talk about the different ways to take policy to practice at the local and state level. We're going to talk about the importance of partnerships to reduce health inequity and health disparity, and how that works at the school system and community level. And most excitingly, we're going to talk about possibility and hope for the future. We're going to talk about our progress and our setbacks, and we're going to talk about what it means and how we can make school mental health policy truly equitable. Leora and I have a dream to host our own game show. Just kidding. These are our why is school mental health policy important? We call it our whatabouts. So what is it all about? Why are we here? And I'll let you lead since you're the first in our comedy act, Leora.
Well, so first of all, I want to say I'm so happy to be here, and that this is our fourth of four recorded sessions. So if you are listening and you are watching 1, 2, 3, 4, this is the last one, the final one. It also means that you may have heard this 3 times already, and you're about to hear the fourth. If you haven't heard it at all, either way, I'm inviting you to think about which of these in this moment is like giving you back some energy, giving you back some life, because this work can be really draining. And so it's a moment of self-reflection of when you hear us say, boom, 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 which one is like, yep, that's right, that's my call. So our first, it's about, when we talk about why school mental health policy, is that ultimately it's about health, holistic health. And we know that school mental health policies sometimes focus on the micro, on the referral pathway, on the access to mental health providers, on suicide prevention, which is not really a micro, it's macro. But what we're arguing and what we're inviting us to think about is that these policies, that school mental health policies, are about holistic health, the whole school culture, school climate, and the ecosystem that the school is situated in, and everything, the social conditions that the school is situated in impacts school-based policy, and school-based policy influences the social conditions. So it's about health.
It's about anti-racism. More than just equity, anti-racism is about action. We're not neutral, and trauma-informed policies cannot be neutral. This is a time for action, and policy is one way to do that.
Yeah, and that one always makes me remember that as practitioners, because today's session is on moving from policy to practice, that oftentimes we think that that we can be really objective in this work. And this is the reminder that this work is never objective and our leadership is never objective, which brings us to sustainability. So there have been, sustainability also is not a neutral word. There are positive things that are sustained and there are deeply harmful things that are sustained. And so part of the conversation today is also thinking about what walls of our house, of our school mental health house, are still standing, that are relics of past systemic violation and violence, and what walls of this house do we want to build to do transformational justice through policy?
Because for me, it's about accountability and safety, putting on the hat of what we think about as safety in state leadership positions, and considering and changing our narrative around safety to be more than fences, walls, and bulletproof glass, and more about hiring, caring, and compassionate individuals who can create relationships and connect, and creating safety through the way the campus feels and the resources that are available to support and connect our families to our campuses, and making through policy our own actions accountable, holding ourselves to a standard, and a standard that's written down.
Yeah. Hopefully some of our folks today will talk about how those standards can also be co-designed by the families and educators and students that we serve and work with. The fifth one, I'm just going to totally showcase my bias, is, well, that's a meta, because I'm making my implicit bias explicit, this is one of my favorite ones. It's about making the implicit commitments explicit. So when we write policy, we name when we title something, we're giving language to our internalized and internal belief systems. So when we're creating a trauma-informed policy, or a policy about trauma-informed care, we're deeply messaging a movement, direction, vision. And so the beautiful act of policy is that it can surface what sometimes is unsurfaced or unclear, and it gives us a call to action.
And it also gives us a place to start as an organization to take care of ourselves, the self-care of an organization, but that trickles into community care. when you use policies to repair narratives of systemic harm, a lot of times that starts with reviewing your own agency, your own school, your own district, your own state's policies of how the folks who represent that agency, that school, that district are held and supported and resourced. And so generating policies is about caring for your community, ensuring it reflects the community that you serve, and looking at equity at all levels of leadership and implementation.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
No, you do it. You do it. You do
no, okay. You can do the next one. So on day one, we really unpacked the what and the why, what connects us to this work, what are the boundaries of this work, how do we do this work, and why is it important to design collaboratively to dismantle or disrupt some of the historic and injurious policy that continues to exist, and the negative side of sustainability. Our conversations were passionate and rich, and left me feeling invigorated. And there's your plug to go watch them.
Yeah, they definitely left me horizontal, overwhelmed with the amount of information. And also, and I want to invite folks, I know that there were some of our panelists who attended as listeners and learners to the Peer Teachers on Tuesday. If you are with us in the chat and you want to drop in chat box, one thing you remember, or one thing you heard from Tuesday, so we can calibrate our learnings for Thursday. That's part 1 and part 2. I know, Yasmina, you're going to offer some of the quotes from Tuesday, but what I really remembered and felt really moved by was the conversation in the first session about how policy design needs to be incredibly intentional and careful about focusing on root cause, meaning there are some states in our country and some districts who are wanting deeply to be trauma informed and still have corporal punishment as a part of legislation. And how do we actually, yes, of course, champion, organize, legislate for trauma-informed practices in our schools, and also focus on dismantling, interrupting, and taking down policies that still exist that completely go against what some of us are also trying to organize for. So that was a really interesting conversation about how to do the both and that stuck with me.
And even though the policy work can be frustrating and challenging, just drawing the attention to some of the words on this slide, the policies are about people. We talked a lot about how policies are belief systems written on paper. We talked about how change takes time, how change can feel painfully slow, and feeling unprepared for the work that was handed to us when we walked in the door in our policy capacity. And for me, there was even this meta moment when we were asking about the design of the policies and thinking about who are the people who are designing the policies and what voices are missing at the table. And the call to action that I've been just resonating on for the last couple of days, and I'm bringing into this session now. I know we opened a little bit high energy, and this is a big meaty topic to talk about. But what brings you courage in this work?
Yeah.
And what about this work gives you courage? Because this work is transformational, both individually and collectively. And it really requires you to be grounded in yourself, in your values, because a lot of policy work is about, especially implementation, is about compromise. Yeah. And what are you willing to compromise, and what kind of long-term view are you holding in that compromise?
Yeah, Lisa's sharing that what resonated for her from Tuesday or from our first sessions was you may need to flip some tables, and if you can't flip the table on your own, find some other folks to help. So definitely in the foundational, which I think maybe we can hear, hopefully we can hear stories of flipping tables today, is how do we actually, again, with that courage, how do we funnel that courage into feeling like policy implementation is an act of organizing and an act of justice, especially when it comes to school mental health policy.
you, Leora.
Yeah.
Oh, and Jen put in the chat asking the question, whose voices are we not hearing? And we were chatting a little bit prior to the session, hoping this comes up, about what happens if you try to implement policy without hearing all the voices before you roll it out. And I think actually with that, I can liberate us from the PowerPoint. Yay, another day, one less PowerPoint. So I would like to introduce our panelists today. And I just invite you to share. I'm going to put the flow of introductions in the chat, and I'd invite you to share who are your name, who are you in this work, and what brings you to this, what is your role, and how has policy impacted your professional practice. So I am going to start with, let's see, Carla. I'm going to start with Carla, and then I will put the rest of the flow in the chat box. Who are you in this work? What is your role in this work? And what is one way policy has impacted your professional practice?
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Carla Quintero. I am a regional mental health coordinator for the Orange County Department of Education. And so currently what I do is that we're working to strengthen the mental health partnerships between schools and districts and behavioral health services, and to really just increase access to mental health services for students and remove barriers to just anything that's coming up for the family. So if it's basic needs, mental health needs, we understand that they're all interconnected and are working to reduce those barriers. And so for me, policy, it shaped my work essentially because initially I started in community mental health, and policies there are very strict and very detailed. And so starting there and kind of seeing where you could go even within that policy and how to advocate for different policy and work for change, started within that very structured and tight space. And so now kind of being in education, it's a lot, just opening my eyes as to where you can go with policy and just really the positive impact that it can have on your practice, coming from a very, very tight little box. So it's nice to meet you all.
And hello, I'm Jennifer Baker. I am the Project How Well coordinator here in Stanislaus County Office of Education with the Preventions Program. And in regards to understanding kind of the impact and importance of policy and what word I would give it, I really get this feeling of wanting to avoid. I'm going to be honest right there. I think I just thought, oh, policy, but in this position and working with the districts who shared some amazing ways they're starting to actually look at policy and is invigorating me, as well as being on the California Department of Education statewide suicide postvention response team, where I get to sit with a lot of thought leaders who are talking about the legislation and talking about policy and talking about history of policy and talking about what we could do with it is really invigorating, as well as coming here and hearing on Tuesday about the whatabouts. I was like, it was kind of an aha moment that I started to kind of get excited about policy. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you, Jen. My name is Claudia Rojas, and I'm an educator. I've been solely in Los Angeles for the last now 19 years as an educator. I've served as a teacher, I've served as a coach, and as a principal. Currently, I am a newcomer coach. What that means is that I have the privilege of working with students who recently arrived to the country, 3 years or less in our country, and helping them feel welcome, oriented, supported. And it's my favorite job that I've ever had as an educator, as you can imagine. And in terms of policy, I agree with actually both Carla and Jen so far. I would call it like a double-edged sword. it's necessary and really helps to guide our practices. And then sometimes it could also be limiting and frustrating. And I always try to look at it from the perspective of, okay, it's written for a reason, it's developed for a reason. Let me allow it to guide me. And then where I get frustrated, I try to think about, okay, how can I, where's the wiggle room, or where can I push back a little? And then, you know, engage in these types of conversations is exciting. So thank you for allowing me this space to be here today with you.
Donna, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay, I'm Donna Kittrick, and we're in the middle of a severe storm. So if I lose power, I'm in Iowa. I came to this position through Project WARE, which I'm very grateful for, and have been able to sustain a number of systems that we have put forth. And when I think of policy, I think of that's somebody else's job. How am I going to influence policy? It's someone bigger than me, more power. I mean, because I just moved to Iowa for the job, so I didn't really even have any connections. And with the work that we did, I did see policy move forward in our state. Our state requires, with some help from a lot of coalitions that I belong to in our community, we worked with our legislators to implement policy that require our teachers to participate in ACEs training, suicide prevention training, and postvention. So that was a big lift, and I'm part of a policy that went through. So I'm really grateful for that work.
And for those of you who also just had to look up Waterloo, Iowa on a map, as a Midwesterner, I want to let you know that this is in rural Central America, and like that's a big deal. So congratulations on that work.
Hi there, my name is Kendall Fujioka, and I joined Project CalWell, the Project Aware grantees at ABC Unified School District in Los Angeles in 2018, 2019. I did 1 year as grant director. I did a lot of policy, but one of my proudest moments was getting the youth suicide prevention training mandated for all of ABC Unified School District's teachers. And the way that happened was under California's AB 2246, every district had to update its policy. And as I'm sitting there with our district, child supervisor of child welfare and attendance, who was my boss, I was like, I can just change that wording and make it mandatory, right? And he was like, well, we might as well see. And so then when our human resources representative said, is that we have to do the pesticide training, we have to do that. And I was like, nope, it's mandatory. It's written into our board policy. So got to make those 30 minutes. After ABC Unified, I am now just finished up my first year at the University of Washington School of Law, and am going to, in fall, be a research consultant for the UW School Mental Health Assessment Research Training Center. And there I will be coming up with recommendations for social emotional screening for students. That's going to be the topic of my work this fall. So I'm super excited, and I am kind of nerding out and super happy to be here.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Eisenberg. I'm the policy director with the California School-Based Health Alliance. I'm very honored to be a part of today's conversation. If you're not familiar with us, CSHA is a statewide advocacy organization committed to promoting school-based health services in California. And I think maybe a little bit different than a lot of folks on this call, about 95% of my job is about policy. So while that is my my job and my profession and my training, I do think I learn every day. I learn something new about policy making and policy implementation. Some of the nitty gritty stuff about what it takes to pass a bill that you don't learn in your the video you watched in 4th grade. And all of the stuff that goes into implementation. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation, and I'm coming at it from a very different lens than I think a lot of folks on this conversation are.
Thank you, everybody. And again, I'm just really excited for the dialogue that we're going to have today with all of the different lenses that we're bringing. And for those of you listening live or at home, we normed our panelists to have this feel like a dialogue and discussion in our around our dinner table. So if you hear interrupting or yes anding or I disagree a little bit, we've primed them to do that with each other. So this feels very much like a conversation that we would have. So with that, I'll get us started. We discussed in part 1 on Tuesday that designing and writing good policy can be challenging for a lot of reasons, getting the right voices at the table, but implementing them in an equitable manner is where some of the work is even harder. So Lisa, I'm going to throw it over to you first, since policy is 95% of your job. In your experience, what are 1 to 2 things you can think of that help move something from paper into impactful and equitable practice?
On the spot at first, yikes.
Yeah, it's your day job.
I should have decreased that percentage. No. I think that I recognize that I recognize that this is an unsatisfying answer, but I think partnerships is a huge part of implementation. I think when people think about my job as policy director, they think about the obvious parts of passing legislation through the state legislature and getting them signed by the governor, and that being the bulk of my work. And I actually think that that's a very small part of my job. And when I think about outcomes for my job and how do I feel like I'm progressing, I actually like to say that when folks from a state department or a state legislator's office or a policymaker reach out to me with questions about what does this mean? How does school mental health look like through school-based health centers? What would be the impact of suicide prevention on this? When I feel like I can be seen as a resource, or our organization can be seen as a resource, or the folks we work with in the field can be seen as a resource, I feel like that is where I feel like the outcomes are moving forward and implementation is moving forward. So as unsatisfying as one part of that answer to the question is, I think it's partnerships and relationship building. And then I think the second part of the second piece, and this came up a little bit on Tuesday, is requiring a lot of effort to implement policy on the ground. And as a statewide organization, I have a very different perspective than this one. I think a lot of folks in the field might, but I think California has a lot of local control. We defer a lot of implementation and oversight and work onto local entities, counties, school districts, county offices of education, providers, health plans. And so I think implementation really requires folks on the local level understanding that this change happened at the state level, and then actually working through the hard parts of that work at the local level. And I'm actually really curious to see what other folks say, because as a state organization, that stretches our capacity pretty thin. We try to work really closely and lift up practices that are going well. But you also end up often with a state that's a little bit of a patchwork, because you have really great shining examples in one spot of the state, and you have other spots in the state that are really struggling. So yeah, I'm pass it off to other folks to also answer, because I am curious to understand how state entities, state advocates can help support that implementation on the ground as well.
I want to also, before I pass it over to Carla, because I think she has a little bit to add and integrate about assessing what is needed and what is missing. I wanted the first part of what you said, Lisa, when you talked about that was the excitement of getting to be a resource for those actual people, because there's actually really in your state probably like 5 people who can, who are actively probably putting bills or regulations related to school mental health policy forward. And when one of those groups contact you to ask your opinion, that was just the best day. I used to just wait for legislative session to start, because that's the weird place where policy is made, but you don't often get a chance to be in front of it like that. So when you, on the other end of it, when you get this policy that was written by someone who's never been in a classroom, it just, the relationships, yeah. So important.
Absolutely.
Carla, can you add to this? What are some 1 to 2 things that you've found to be impactful to move something into practice?
Yes, I've been like high-fiving Lisa with like everything that she said, because I mean, yes, it's all about the relationships and collaboration. And I know with my role at the Department of Education here in Orange County, the districts really do kind of come to us as like, okay, this is what we have to do. Can you translate that for us? Or what does that mean for a smaller district versus a larger district? And so it really is a lot of that interpretation for them, and kind of helping to, with our program and our grant anyway, we're helping to kind of build capacity and, work on those, whatever the legislation says, how can we build your capacity so that hopefully, this can be an ongoing process to you, or you don't have to pay someone to continue to do it. But, a lot of times that's a lot of work in finding the best resource or the best program, or, and the districts don't have the time to do that. So luckily here in Orange County, we've been, doing that for them, and, doing all of the research and kind of making that more accessible to them. And they are, incredibly grateful for it, especially, like I said, the smaller districts who don't have the manpower, or maybe, funding, and all of that is really difficult. So just like Lisa said, even within a county, it looks different, and, we still fit in, we're, going along with that legislation and that policy, but it does look different for, a lot of different districts across the county. So yes, but I totally agree, the collaboration as well. We connect to, community resources. Like I said, we're building capacity for them to be a resource for them. And we want to make sure that the implementation process isn't such a burden to them, and just make this, easy and accessible to everyone.
Ease and accessibility is the challenge of policy implementation, because often you're translating something that requires systems overhaul into like a real, because policies are about people. And at the end of that is someone's life, livelihood, health, wellness, ability to access care. And Donna, I just want to highlight that a lot of times people think that this can't be done in rural communities because we don't have the access to or capacity to resources. And my observation is that rural communities care for each other in a very just in a way that like neighbors take care of neighbors. Has that been your experience when implementing policy in a rural area, or has it been different?
No, I think that is so true. And I think when you find a group of passionate individuals and collaborate, so we have a suicide prevention coalition and we meet at 7 a.m. and there is a lot of people that are part of it. So we meet before the day so everyone can participate. And we have legislators that come and participate to help us with the heavy lift. So I agree with that. And then we have like a mental health task force, like we just had a meeting today, and we share what's going on in legislation what we want to lift forward. Also being in a rural district, I'm a member of, it's called the Urban Education Network. And I work closely with our superintendent. I'm very fortunate. And on that team is we're going to look at what legislation for school mental health that we want to push forward. So there are lots of avenues collaborating that are really exciting. And so we just kind of support each other and make sure that we're all on the same page.
I think it's really important that, and one of the reasons I'm so glad you're here is to really uplift the unspoken cultural wealth of rural communities, is that absent of formal systems, communities do take care of each other. And we see it play out in real time in rural areas. And I think in my state, Arizona, we saw that especially play out in the way our tribal nations cared for each other. I know in my state, Navajo Nation has the highest vaccination rate. And so we really see the strength of communities when we see policy implementations during challenges. Claudia, I'm hoping that especially when we talk about the close-knit and the action of community, you can talk about what strategies you've observed in your experience and in your role to generate action on some of those important policies.
Yeah, sure. I find it so interesting because when Lisa started talking more from like the state level, I'm like, that's exactly what we do at the school level, right? So it's kind of cool to think about like that corriente, right? That current that runs from the state all the way, trickles down to the school sites. But really it is about those partnerships, because I'm not sure who said it, but districts can't, I think it was you, Carla, right? Districts can't really do it on their own. Schools for sure can't do it on their own. And so we really depend on those community partnerships to help us implement all sorts of policies. And that obviously helps to build those relationships. And then I think too, you know, at different school sites that I've been at, you can imagine there are, I work primarily with teachers, and there are teachers who are more veteran, such as myself. And then we have novice teachers just coming out of teacher ed programs. And so the diversity among the staff and like sort of that historical knowledge and experience around policy work gets then transferred to the newer teachers. And then obviously the newer teachers come in with certain ideas about what schooling is going to look like, and then you have to merge those two together, right? So those relationships are really critical among the teaching staff who's going to be able to actually bring policy to the ground to the students, right? And of course, it's about, I think Lisa said it, I'm not sure who said it, but about building that capacity and that ownership, I think, among school sites. And you can really, I mean, I've had, again, the opportunity to be at different school sites in my career. And I agree that it is like a patchwork of scenarios, right? So there's some schools that really shine in taking policy and like making it their own, really making it their own, making the accommodations for their students and their school, their community. And then there are schools that I've been at who literally will just take whatever's on paper and kind of try to, you know, follow it verbatim because that's what you're being asked to do. But where that, I think the other piece too is like the creativity around it, right? Like where that's lacking, it's really obvious, like you can feel it. Whereas, you know, principals or administrators who are able to look at something and say, okay, I understand that what I was saying earlier, right? I understand that this is guiding me and this is what I need to do. I also know who my stakeholders are, right? And what they've experienced, what they're worried about and what they're excited about. And then so you want to make sure that it's going hand in hand. I don't know if I'm making sense. I feel like I'm rambling a little, but yeah,
It's like the pieces on the chessboard, right?
yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And I already forgot the original question, but yeah, I hope that whatever I said made a little bit of sense.
So it did, and actually I think as you were talking, it more and more made me want to transition over to Kendall, because I think when you talk about needing all the pieces on the chessboard, and I might have obsessively been listening to the Hamilton soundtrack this week in like honor of the policy series, because very few moments in life do you get to be, Kendall, in the room when it happens, when all you have to do is stick the word mandated in there and you saved lives. How did you get to that room, to that moment when you realized all you had to do was stick in the word mandated?
I interned in Head Start, got really interested in early childhood education. I went to the Seattle Children's at Overlake Outpatient Mental Health Center, where you're seeing like the children of Seahawks and you need all of this special white glove treatment. And then children in Head Start, there's nothing. So I was already really interested in that. Went to get my master's in social work at USC and was placed as an intern at ABC Unified. So it's 2014. It is year one of ABC receiving Project Aware, and like just timing, beautiful timing. So I was a first year intern. The district demographics, it's like 50% socioeconomically disadvantaged, 50% like literally like gated communities and $1 million homes. The Whitney High School is the like ranked nationally among the top 10, top 5 schools in the past. Very exclusive, very high achieving. And at the opposite end, there's these schools that are 98% socioeconomically disadvantaged, just severely under-resourced. Of course, geographically, where we called them the North End schools and the South End schools. I'm like, this is not okay. And I was in child welfare and attendance there. Like you said, how did I get to the room where it happened? So I did 2 years as a social work intern, and I'm not sure if the people in this room will remember Terry Via McDowell, just an amazing champion of this work. And at ABC Unified, she did 2 years. She got us all these grants: the Safe Schools, Healthy Students, School Climate Transformation Grant, Tobacco Use Prevention Education, then got us Project Aware. 2 years, and right as I was graduating with my master's, Terry leaves and they create this new position of school social worker, and like school social worker, someone with a child welfare and attendance credential, someone with like 2 years experience in a
unicorn perfect storm of a human being, and there you were.
Yeah. So I started there. I did do a lot of the data work. I love data. I did a lot of attendance work, right? So I was looking at the socioeconomic demographics of attendance and looking at that and being like, hey, this is not okay. Our continuation high school that was pulling from district wide, not okay. Suspension, we ended up, okay, so accountability gets big for me. 2017, 2018, Los Angeles County Office of Education, nope, this was state, California Department of Education recognizes ABC as the #1 school district of Los Angeles County. Look it up, fact check me. It was like 2017, 2018. Cheryl Bodger, our director of school services, did 2 years of Project Cowell management, and bless her soul, but she was a principal escalated to a district administrator, director of the K-6 schools, was put this, here's Project Aware, here's Project Schools Climate Transformation Grant. here's
So
no.
like we talked on Tuesday, trial by fire hose.
Mhm. And then Cheryl Bodger does 2 years and retires. And I'm
She tired. She tired. She got trial by fire hose.
yeah. And literally, as the room where it happens, director of school services, our district foster and homeless youth liaison, who had been my supervisor as the MSW intern, she was my MSW supervisor, and I are sitting in the room, and she's like, so who's going to do the grants? We're just like, figuratively, not literally. But at the end of the day, I get handed like literally just binders of Project Caldwell. Like, here's 2 years of budgets, 4 years of budgets that don't match, and here's a bunch of different accountability things. Again, I was like, okay, cool, trial by fire. I called it trial by fire. And at the end of the day, we also got on the Los Angeles County Office of Education's red list for our foster and homeless youth. You don't say.
What's a red list? Is that like a, I'm not from California. Is that like a naughty list?
The California school dashboard system gives you a green, orange, yellow, orange, red.
Okay, so this is not a good thing.
It's an accessibility thing. We're still the #1 district in Los Angeles County, but how come you have disproportionality in your special education and your suspension and your student achievement, and your foster and homeless youth are falling significantly behind? So we have the big meeting with Los Angeles County Office of Education with our superintendent, our assistant superintendent, director of secondary schools, director of schools, supervisor of child welfare and attendance, district foster and homeless youth liaison, Kendall.
It was really surprising to me when I transitioned from district to state how the politics like changed completely. And so I want you to do a both and. What advice would you give, Jen, I'm going to go to you first. What advice would you give someone just beginning their journey in state or county leadership type of policy? And what strategies within that advice have you seen be successful? Because I also wanted you to answer the last question, but I think it'll fold in really well to this question.
You know, as I listen to everybody speak, and I know looking at our chosen professions, I did look where most of us are licensed in mental health that are in this work. And so what we know first and foremost is the most important thing is connection, right? Connection and relationship. And so I was curious, and one of the questions I was having that was coming up was, it was one of the things I was going to talk about and how I did that, but I wonder if people know how to do that sometimes. You know, when people come into us, when I was working in private practice, and that was a lot of the work, was how to communicate with people, how to make connection, how to build relationships. So when I stepped into this role coming from 20 years at Behavioral Health and Recovery Services, I had worked with Head Start for 10 years, but Head Start had been siloed. It was kind of separate from the upper grades. And they do SEL like nobody's business. And it used to, I get frustrated about it. And even now I'm kind of like, you don't listen to them, but you should. They know what they're talking about. They do this day in, day out. So I looked at my assets, and my assets to me is I mapped, who do I have relationships in the community? Who's the clinician that's out there that I worked with at Behavioral Health and Recovery? Who do I know that worked at the Office of Ed that now is working in a school district? How do I build those assets up? And then how do I build new ones? So these assistant superintendents like, oh, okay, yeah, we signed off on doing this. And now you're going to come in with all these deliverables. But I didn't do it that way. I just came in and I came alongside them, just as we would with clients that we're working with. I met them where they were at. I learned about them. I didn't come in as this expert. I honestly didn't know. I mean, I know about mental health stuff, but even that, I'm very clear about what I do and what I don't know. And I think they really appreciate it. That's the feedback that I get from them, is that I put myself in their shoes. I listened to what they felt their frustrations and barriers were to the work that we were going to be doing. and then put my hand out as like, what can we do? And then I look for those moments in the chessboard, because I used to be the, you know, I'd get on there and I'd want to charge, you know, that was me in my younger days. I wanted to like, that's why I think I avoid policy. There you go. I just hit that one. I avoid policy because I couldn't make it change. I don't like politics because I feel like it's this upper system that I can't influence, and it hurts. It hurts me. So I avoid it. But so I've learned I can be more subtle on the chessboard. I can come in and I start to do things like I have all my districts meet together. They hear what district over here is doing with policy around this new policy that one of the school districts is looking at is dress. Girls came forward and said, this is not right. You have a dress policy for us that is unfair and prejudicial to us. So because she's skinny over here, she can wear that skirt, but because I'm heavier, I cannot. So these Generation Zers, they're amazing, and they're coming forward and they're speaking up. And I'm like, perfect. So anything I can do to start like, hey, let's shine a light. I'm a spotlight, right? Let's shine the light over here. Oh, look at this policy around sexual harassment that this one did. Oh, they did what? Oh, they did. Yeah, let's take a look at that together, right? I'll put it in front of them and slowly start to move the chessboard instead of feeling like I have to be that knight and try to knock everybody over with it.
I agree, Jen. You know, just really, you know, working collaboratively. And I think, you know, using, you know, since we're all in mental health, the relationship of like that client and, you know, meeting them where they're at and guiding them through it. You know, it really is about, you know, providing those resources, and then maybe even here's a checklist, you know, these are, you know, best practices, but, you know, that's part of what my program does is we create that community of practice, and then we always, you know, offer it out. Is there anyone who'd like to share a highlight? And, you know, so we have all of these districts who are, you know, sharing about all the incredible things that they're doing. And then other districts, you know, are like, oh, wow, that's great. Or they've had good experience and, you know, it's been vetted. And, you know, so that makes the work easier, you know, when it's through implementation, because you have those real world experiences. And, you know, it makes that accessibility, you know, a lot, you know, more impactful, because it's one of the districts in their area. It's someone that, you know, they probably know, you know, in a district partner who's had that positive experience, and that can really, you know, work well for them. I think, you know, something else that, you know, I would add too is really working with, you know, whatever, you know, district is working, if it's coming from a district level, you know, implementation of policy, them really getting the buy-in from the staff and establishing that why. You know, sometimes staff don't hear it. It's just, oh, the district said, or the state said, or, you know, wherever it's coming from, it's just, this is how it has to be done. But when you really feel, you know, you know, you have the teachers as stakeholders and you get their buy-in and their input into what's being provided, it, you know, it can skyrocket from there. And they really are, you know, the ones who are going to, you know, be that interaction with the students and the families. And, you know, so really just getting them that buy-in to the why, and this is how it's going to help, you know, all of us can really help when someone's just starting out as well.
And I just, I also wanted to, even from a state leadership level, I was one of the panelists on the first day. So I feel like I just have to say this, young people can help with policy implementation too. And my favorite experience was at the Department of Ed when we were developing the model school safety plan that the March for Our Lives kids had advocated for. There were a couple of students who were they asked for like a resource repository for the state. And there were a couple of students who were on my committee, and we were talking about, they asked such a good question, like, what do you consider a resource? And we had this beautiful dialogue, and ended up, you know, they ended up helping us create a survey that was one of the most responded to surveys that the department had ever put out about, like, what is a safety resource to you? And so they really helped us with really helped us think about the implementation in a way that as bureaucrats and I'm just gonna say bureaucrats and old folks, we just would not have. And that's why I was so happy that they were in the room. For district leadership or school site level leadership, Claudia, Donna, do you have any stories to share about tips for getting started, someone new in policy implementation at the district or school site level?
I think for me, and it kind of resonates on what Carla said and what Jen said, is when you develop that relationship, but when people begin to trust that you're going to deliver and that you're, collaborative and things like that. So in that situation and being new to Waterloo, I worked at Michigan State prior to coming here. I was able, people started saying, hey, I have this pot of money. What could you do with it? Hey, I have this small pot of money. And so we were able to pool because school-based mental health was our big initiative. And if a student doesn't have insurance, we don't charge the family. It's provided free. And it's backed into with these dollars from our community, our county, our foundations and things like that. So I think building that trust and delivering and being accountable for how the money is spent and the time. And then the last part, which you just touch on, is our student voice. Our student voice is so powerful, and we were able to really work on bringing that out with our Project Aware. I was able to hire a student coordinator that is the whole focus of their work was mental health awareness and gathering student voice.
Thanks, Donna. Yeah, definitely. I had the privilege of being a founding principal for a small school here in Los Angeles, where our career pathway was around mental and behavioral health. So although I'm not credentialed, it is my passion. And I think in another life, I might have gone down that route or anyway, I'm bringing that up to say that when we developed curriculum for our students in that pathway, it really was based on what Kendall was sharing, right? It's those personal experiences that bring everybody to this work, right? And always keeping those core values as a focus, right? And I think that involves what Jen was saying. What you said, Jen, it reminded me about the importance of showing our own vulnerabilities and being as transparent as possible, right? Being able to say, I really understand this, and this is an area that I feel skilled at, but then here are the pieces that don't make a lot of sense to me, and we're gonna work together to try to figure this out, right? Not ever coming to the table thinking that we're the experts or we know everything, because that's just not realistic, right? And I think we all know people that try to come to the table like that, and we probably don't really enjoy working with them very closely, right? And so I think I've always been about that, just come as you are, right? And don't worry if you don't have all the answers. And of course, I'm going to also shine a light on youth advocates, youth leaders, being able to work with young people on a daily basis and to really sit with them and listen, right? They have such a wealth of experiences to bring to us and ideas. And if we just give them those tools to be able to share and be heard and really listen with our hearts and encourage them to speak with their hearts. I think that's what I would recommend to at a school level. I'm thinking more of admin of principals as they're getting started, is you're going to have so much on your plate and you're going to be worried about so many policies. I mean, right now I'm thinking about my friends who are now dealing with COVID, right? And case tracking and just keeping the school safe, right? And that's really their highest priority at this time. And I know how overwhelmed they are. And when I talk to them, I just try to get them to take a breath, right? I mean, just like the simplest of practices, because it's so overwhelming and so stressful. And so I would just encourage people to pause and really be okay with being vulnerable, with being uncomfortable, and elicit support from those around you that have that same, again, those same core values that you carry for this work.
Claudia, that really reminded me of just the incredible burden our school administrators are carrying right now. So go hug a school principal today, because I stopped at my old high school just a couple weeks ago, and within my own state, which has conflicting guidance on what's legal and what's a public health recommendation, our principals are stuck in the middle, and the burden that they're carrying is more than most people can imagine, because principals aren't in it for the money. They're even less paid than teachers when you think about how many hours they work. Like they have to be there. If someone's in the building, there always has to be someone there, and they do it because they love education. And I cannot imagine what it would be like to be a school administrator right now. So we keep fighting for them, for the kids. Thank you for reminding me of that, Claudia. I know, you're bringing up COVID-19 and all that's going on. There have been some highlights from that. There have been some gains. There have been some things that we saw happen that we did not think in the 5 years ago. If you would have told me that this many people would have been talking about school mental health policy, I would have said bollocks. No, they will not be, and they'll probably be cutting our funding. So that's not what happened, and here we are. So how have you observed policy, Lisa, especially with your and my dog, of course, brought in his squeaky toy right now because we're from home life. I'll get that in a minute. So Lisa, how have you seen policy implemented creatively during COVID-19, and what has COVID-19 taught us about policy implementation that we need to keep in mind moving forward?
I have a cat that meows uncontrollably during important meetings, so I feel you. I think it's been really interesting to reflect on this a little bit. Yes, I agree with you, Yasmina, that like this focus on school mental health has been pretty staggering. In California, we're seeing billions of dollars, lots of zeros going into school mental health. And I'm relatively relatively early in my career. I haven't been doing this forever, but like I'm still so surprised that we've seen such a sea change in that. I do think I want to hold and acknowledge that I think the need has been for school mental health, for school health services, has been elevated because of the pandemic, and that need was there before the pandemic. And I think that there are thousands of people that have been saying this for much longer than I have. And, I do think it's a testament to the longevity of people's advocacy for school health, that it's like school mental health, school health that's rising to the level of policymakers really hearing it for the first time. Really specifically, one thing that we are seeing is the growth of telehealth in California. And, I think telehealth is an interesting thing for school-based health to grapple with, because what does it mean? It's an access thing, but there's also like, we want there to be adults on school campuses that young people interact with and have good relationships with on a day-to-day basis. So I think there's a tension there. And I've seen a lot of policies and flexibilities that have been given during COVID that people in the state are like, oh no, that makes sense to keep doing this after the pandemic is over. And these are conversations that folks have had with the state for years before COVID happened. And so I do think there's a recognition at the state level, finally, that there are some ways to access services. One example was like, having a young person enroll in a confidential program for health services via a phone call, as opposed to going to the county social services agency. Like, there was just so much stagnation on this policy change for years. And then like seeing it happen and seeing young people have access to these services has been very transformational in a small but very important way, I think. So I think that's something we're seeing a little bit of, and I'm excited about, and cognizant of the cost of that excitement a little bit as well. What this past year and a half has meant to make these movements happen, these changes happen.
I would just like to add to that. I think telehealth in our rural area has been very helpful. And when we shut down in March, right, when everyone shut down, our school-based providers were quickly able to do telehealth because we had what we call COWS, computers on wheels. So our students, if they wanted, were able to continue participation in meeting with their school-based therapist. Then confidentiality came in because now you're providing therapy in a home that was not always there. So the school-based therapist had to figure that out, make sure the student was comfortable having those conversations. So, we learned a lot from that. And in our school-based services, we provide them 12 months a year. So we don't stop during summer, we continue. And with that braided blended funding, we're able to do that. But then the insurance companies, and I don't know if you guys are experiencing this, the insurance companies, we were doing telehealth and audio health. So some people don't have access to computers or Chromebooks to be able to link into a secure network. And so our legislators recently are taking away the audio health, which we're seeing a decrease in services because it's not the same. And so we're just meeting today to hopefully get that changed.
Wow, I hadn't considered that. I wonder if it's the same in every state. That gives me something to think about. Jen, I think that you had something to share related to movement on and to Lisa's earlier point, things that we know have been a problem for a long time before COVID, and now during COVID, we are able to take some movement on them.
Yeah, as you said that, Lisa, it reminded me that historians have shown that major life transitions, what we could call life quakes, happen with regularity. They're integral to us as human beings to move forward, to be propelled forward. We don't like the pain that we have to go through to make that happen, but I really see that both locally within the districts and in the state and as a country. So the districts, they definitely are looking at that. They have been looking at it. It brought to light areas that they needed to focus on around suicide prevention and intervention. They'd known that. They've been doing the same training over and over and over, and people kind of got numb to that. So with the statewide suicide postvention response team, we were having conversations just recently about the fact that some of the policies, the way they've come out, like you mentioned earlier, are hard to understand, right, for districts. They look at it and some of them kind of go, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'll just slap that through. So to really start to support them in doing some clarifying. So as a group, we're talking about doing a training through the building of network, through the response team, where we can clarify some of that for folks as to like, well, here's, in my words, the shiny gold star, right, of where we would want to be, but what's the reality? You know, what can we really do in those small incremental moments? And I've heard each of you ladies mention that today too. And I'm a real strength-based person. So where are the strengths? And then just like, hey, that's great. Look at you, you know, coming alongside and then showcasing that and telling them I'm going to showcase it. Hey, I'm going to this meeting for the state and I'm talking about you. You now have a mental health webpage, like a tab on your webpage that your MSW interns helped create. And all of this wonderful stuff is on here. So guess what? There's also a referral for assistance form that's on there that we want you to, you know, do as well, and just try to support that and move that forward.
I think it also helps people know what is possible when they see, like, and also why visibility matters, like why I'm glad we have representation from a rural area. Just seeing that other people can do it can be so so beneficial to other leaders. And so with that, I would like to get into the juicy juice of the conversation that I know many of our leaders are going to be here, which is like, let's sustain this by creatively funding it. So I'm going to start first with Lisa. What have you seen schools or systems leaders do to braid multiple funding streams to improve access to mental health services?
I love talking about braided funding, so I could take us way past 4:30 about this. I think there's a lot. I mean, I would just say that there are a lot of resources in California talking about how to leverage Medi-Cal and how to leverage dollars. We have a resource that is on our website around public funding that we're revising as we speak. So I can put a link in the chat to that. So
Actually,
I do
Lisa,
think.
Could I, for anyone who maybe, we had some folks on our earlier session say they were beginners to policy work, and I realized I needed to do some level setting. Would you like to tell everyone what we mean when we say braided funding first, and then how to get some of that goodness?
I think braided funding is a good way of, like, you know, blending funding is where you put like some money together with other money and it mixes around together. And then braided funding is really where you have a funding stream that goes to X, Y, and Z, and you have a funding stream that goes to A, B, and C, and they fit, and the services fit together perfectly into a comprehensive system. It's not, the funding streams aren't mixed together, but the funding streams are going to pieces of a holistic puzzle. So that's how I think about it.
I'm going to make that into an infographic. It's beautiful because this gets us into the conversation about supplanting versus supplementing, which is like the thing that keeps grant managers up at night. If you're at a school site level, that was a beautiful explanation. So now that I remembered to level set, and you started to talk about all the options that are available in California to braid some of that state Medicaid funding with potentially other educational funding streams, I'm going to hand it back to you now. Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's good. It's good to level set. I've done webinars on this, so I'm happy to do that, and I will put a link in the chat for you to access the resources. There are Medicaid dollars, there are state mental health dollars that are really flexible, there are school dollars that get reimbursement for Medicaid, there are school dollars that serve special education students. So there are also federal and state flexible dollars for schools. And so I think one of the key takeaways from my perspective is, I think there's often this perception that you're going to find one funding stream that's going to be the silver bullet, or if you're coming to it from your perspective, you're like, I understand this funding stream and I can either use it to pay for all of the services, or I can only pay for this narrow scope. And I think one of the things that I try to say is no one funding stream is going to do it all. You actually, to provide comprehensive school mental health services, you have to use multiple funding streams. And so that's one thing I want to say. And then as I was thinking about this question, I do want to just acknowledge that I think oftentimes funding streams, be they Medi-Cal, be they really flexible education dollars or more flexible education dollars, they go to pay for services or they go to pay for programs that are often affiliated with adults delivering these services or programs. And I think about that a lot. I've been in lots of conversations talking about how to braid funding or who are the adults working together to create this continuum of services. And I think oftentimes it misses the mark on who is receiving those services or who is participating in those programs, because it becomes a conversation about scope, about responsibilities, about what types of things can I provide and get funded for. It talks about the adults in the room and not the young people in the room. And so I don't have a solution for that. I don't have there's not one funding stream that's going to solve that. I just think when we're talking about funding streams, I don't always remember that piece because I talk about, well, you could pay for this or you can pay for that. And so I say that to also remind myself that, let's try to divorce it from the adults in the room as much as we can.
At the end of the day, it's about the kids in the classroom and their wellness and the adults who are taking care of them, and less about how we're going to pay and whose insurance we're going to bill. Yeah. Jen, Carla, I think you had some stories, some tales to share around braided funding as well.
Well, so I have a little bit of a soapbox. I can get on my high horse on a little piece of this because the Medi-Cal in California, they are trying to woo schools to bill for Medi-Cal services. As a former having a little bit of that trauma of the electronic health record, having to get notes in, assess. Yeah, Carla, y'all, you're right. It's way harder than they made it sound on their little video clip that we had to watch on webinar. And I'm trying, I'm talking to my districts and I'm all, okay, look, you'd have to have a biller and you have to do audits because I've seen the disallowances for schools. I'm on their little thing. It's coming in. And so that means you won't get paid. Do you understand that? And remember, so you think this one clinician that you have on your campus is going to be now serving Medi-Cal and then it's going to be able to see others? Like, wait a minute, do you realize they have to have a certain amount of billable service to Medi-Cal to be able to even have that? So I'm finding, I'm trying to help them understand those pieces to the puzzle so that they don't just jump on that bandwagon. So that's the one soapbox, but going back a little bit then with that piece on what am I doing to try to be that fulcrum? I wiggle my way into anything, right? Into anything that they're doing, so within the Office of Ed, they haven't traditionally had somebody like me housed within their building. So people are starting to find out, oh, wait, we have a mental health person. Oh, you created a website, a website now on our Office of Ed. Oh, wait, you have a podcast and you're talking about it. Wow. And then I get into the Strategic Arts Initiative Council. I'm talking to them about crisis intervention because they of course had the active shooter training, which was just about those bad kids who we need to watch for. I'm like, can we, so I'm finding that I just try to wiggle into things. AB 2083, which is an assembly bill around a system of care, because I know the language of BHRS and Behavioral Health and Recovery Services, our county mental health. I think I've used that acronym earlier. I know the language so I can try to help them understand. And even today in a call, I had to say, you can't just invite one school district because they are the biggest one. All the other ones out there, I know what they say. They look at them and they go, oh, you're inviting them again. They get the money. They get the grants. You're going to work with them. They're out. They're like, you know what, forget it. You're not listening to us. We don't have a voice in this. And so they don't have to. Like you said, it's local control. They can do what they want, even those little districts. So that would be a piece of advice I would give is get in there and wiggle in as a project coordinator for CalWell and find your alliances.
I think Jen and I have that same trauma of like Medi-Cal billing and you know, them always threatening to take away, you know, mental health funding, and then education, you know, funding has always sort of been the same way. So, I mean, it's this horrible boat that we're just, you know, kind of stuck in. But yes, I agree, you know, with Jen, and you know, using this braided funding, it's so interesting, because when you see someone doing something awesome, it's like, oh, how'd you get that funded? You know, where's your funding streams? Where, you know, and it's like the hot topic, because you want to know how to do something similar and sustain it for a few years if you could. I mean, you know, that would be ideal. You know, and then how funding changes in order to sustain something. So it's all just so complicated. And but yeah, with us being regional mental health coordinators right now, we really are using our grant funding to build capacity for school districts. We're connecting them to community resources that maybe can help with that Medi-Cal funding, and getting people in the schools that can bill Medi-Cal, so it doesn't have to be, you know, just solely on the school district to do that. And then, you know, just connecting them to additional grant opportunities, partnerships, anything that we can grab onto that can be something maybe successful. You know, and then it's always a different story when it comes to sustaining whatever funding it is that you got them. You know, so, you know, what are some, you know, other ways that maybe we can get reimbursement, or is that even a thing? Can the district, you know, does the district have the capacity for that? You know, and it's really about filling those gaps again, you know, in the funding. And, you know, philanthropic seed money is awesome and amazing for getting something off the ground when you need to start something up, and then are maybe waiting for reimbursement later if the program allows, or whatever service you're providing allows for that. You know, so we have just been looking at kind of anything, you know, and really using that, you know, braided funding. Okay, this can go here and this goes there, and now we have that comprehensive, you know, hopefully more comprehensive mental health program.
Thank you, Carla. This hour and a half has gone by in a blink. So I'm gonna let you start thinking of, we're gonna do a rapid fire round robin. What is one thing that you hope folks listening to today take away? And while you're thinking, I want to close out with saying, if you heard philanthropic seed money and you think, well, I don't live in Orange County, there are no philanthropies here, I never want you to underestimate the power of a local community church and a bake sale, because I'm telling you, some of the greatest action, it comes from not necessarily big money donors, but from a group of concerned kids or parents. So don't want you to think that you need to go find the Bill Gates of your community to donate. Well, I'm sure it wasn't Bill Gates, but know that there's more than one way to creatively fund. You can all do it. And even if you're in a rural area, tribal area, big city, it's possible. It's possible. It's possible. Rapid fire round will go Kendall, Claudia, Lisa, Carla, Jen, and Donna will take us home.
I would ask that people take away resilience. I think that has been a key component of my work personally and professionally. Resilience is part of life. So I will pass it off to Claudia.
I would say youth voices. Please always include them in this important work.
Jen, I don't remember if I said it in the same order as I wrote it in the chat. Dang it! I failed the memory recall test.
Okay, because I thought it was Carla. I was like, which one am I? Okay, after Carla. Okay, my takeaway, because what I personally got from Tuesday and today, and every time I get the opportunity to come to the NTTAC webinars, is you're not alone. There is a big group here, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna reach out to her, I'm gonna reach out to her, I'm gonna reach out to her, right? And I think that's the biggest thing that I would want to share. And I'm available if anybody would like to pick my brain on anything further.
I love learning what is happening. I don't often get to learn what's happening at local regional level, so I appreciate the opportunity to make these connections and learn about that. And I would add, I don't think we got to really touch on this very much, or I didn't get to mention that. I encourage folks to build on what exists. I think California in particular is seeing like, let's do something new, let's do something transformational. And I understand the desire to do that after a period of crisis. And let's continue to build on what we know works and maybe what has been under-resourced in the past. So that's what I will leave it with. And I will pass to Carla.
Thank you. Yes, I think just, I want someone to take away, just collaborate, like whatever it is that you want to do, there is a way to do it. You just have to find that right person. You have to reach out to somebody, have that bake sale, like Yasmina said, if that's what it takes, there's always a way to get something up and running. Students are a great way to advocate for that if they're really behind a new policy or a new way, of doing things, a new program, something that they really, stick to and resonate with. They are all about, getting something started. So, definitely collaborate, and work with the students and, those who are your stakeholders.
I think one of the important things that I heard today is the importance of relationships and trusted relationships, and that we're not in it alone. We may feel like it in our district or in our state, but there's a lot of community partners that want to see the best for our students and the children in the community, and to ask them to help us lift it up.
Thank you, Donna. I think what I heard, and Carrie just dropped in the chat box, we'd love to hear from you, your feedback from today, whether you're watching this live or recording. Contact us with your feedback. But what I heard was this interconnectedness, this being in relationship with one another, that together we can. And I think of the few benefits that I have found from this pandemic is a new way to connect with passionate folks who are doing this work, and a new way to feel not alone. I think if you would have told me 5 years ago that this conversation would have been happening in this way, geographically, I wouldn't have believed you. And I'm really hopeful that we continue to be in community in this non-ordinary reality of tiny little electronic squares, to make the world a little bit better and to help each other survive through those tough times, and remember our why. And it was a real privilege and honor to share space with you all today. Anything for the good of the order? Unmute yourself, celebrate, dance to the music.